Let's talk about chimpanzees. It's easier.
Okay.
Male chimps do most of the violence. About 95% of the violence in murders are committed by male chimpanzees, and most of the victims are males. And you know, I think there's no doubt that biology plays a very important role in male proclivity to violence, for example.
Sure.
So they're trouble. Yeah. So boys can be a problem that way. And And I think the many ways in which society are cultural traits that we invent, their purpose is to shape and guide those tendencies to violence to kind of mitigate them. Sure. But we don't just need, again, going back to the book, Serbs, we don't just need, we don't just use culture for that purpose. There's an argument in the book that we humans have domesticated ourselves. So if you compare dogs to wolves and domesticated cats to wild cats from which they descended, or guinea pigs to the wild guinea pigs from which they descended, or horses to the wild horses to which they descended. If you again and again you compare these couplets, these pairs, you find that the domesticated version of these animals are much more placid, much more peaceful. They also tend to have floppy ears. They have piebald fur. So guinea pigs and dogs and cows all have splotchy black, white, and brown fur. Why is that? The animals from which they evolved didn't have that kind of splotchiness. So, and they become much more peaceful. If you compare human beings, but they had those animals were domesticated by humans. Like I deliberately allowed the reproduction of this member of the litter and not that member because this member was nicer. And so across time we evolve a more a domesticated version of the ancestral species. So we get my miniature dachshund from a wolf, like the kind of things that were photographed out in your studio here. Crazy transition. Now, if you look at humans and you compare us to our ancestors or to other primates, for all the world, it looks like we have been domesticated. We are more peaceful and placid. We have sex outside, non-reproductive sex. This is another thing. So these domesticated animals will have sex even when it's not time to reproduce. Our tails, we don't have tails anymore, but our tails get shortened. There are all these features that we have, these behavioral qualities and these physical properties that we have. We get a feminization of our faces. Our jaws become smaller. Like if you compare these domesticated animals to their non-domesticated ancestors, the domesticated version are less violent. So we lose a lot of the traits, that physical and psychological traits associated with violence. But there was no one that domesticated us. So the question is how? How did that happen? And one of the theories that's discussed in Blueprint, and that's advanced by other scientists, this is not my work, is that we self-domesticated. And that what happened over the millennia, over millions of years, is that weaker individuals in our groups, when one individual became too autocratic and too violent and too powerful, they banded together and killed that guy. And so over time, we were killing the more violent members of our species, weeding out those people. And therefore, the gene pool changed across time, and we self-domesticated. We are more peaceful today than we would have been because we domesticated ourselves. And this is one of the arguments that's also made to help explain the origins of goodness, actually. And
the origins of cooperation, because it would take a few good people to kill the bad person that's running everything that's evil.
Correct. Yeah. That's exactly right.
Recreational sex does occur in bonobos, which is really weird, isn't it? Because they're so similar to regular chimps.
Yes, but they're not the same species. They also have homosexual sex. They use sex to make up. You know, so they're very licentious species. That's exactly right. And bonobos are felt to be a self-domesticated chimpanzee. So so bonobos are to chimps as let's say dogs are to wolves. But there was the dogs we domesticated. The bonobos self-domesticated is the theory.
Do they know why or how?
Well, the theory is that they did it, like we were saying, by weeding out, killing the more aggressive members. What we know must have happened is that the nicer guys must have been able to have more offspring. So the gene pool changed over time because of the differential success of the nicer guys. Now, people have looked at this even in human societies. They've looked, for instance, there's a study I talk about in the book of different pathways to reproductive success amongst the Tsimane, which is a group in Amazonia, and other societies are similar. So you can either be like big and strong, or you can be charismatic and have useful knowledge. In both ways, you have more children. So there are these competing ways in our species of enhancing your reproductive fitness.
Are you aware of Sapolsky's work
Yes.
with baboons?
Uh-huh.
That's a fascinating case, right? Because they were studying baboons in Africa that would eat from human garbage, and a bunch of them got sick and died. And it turns out that the most violent and ruthless of them got sick and died, and it changed the entire culture of the baboon tribe.
Oh, I don't know that story.
Oh,
That's
it's
interesting.
a fascinating one.
I'll have to
They
look for that
started
one.
grooming each other and being kind to each other.
Oh my God! Yeah, that's a good example. But there was
And
an
it lasted.
accidental. It was an
Yes,
accidental.
It was an accidental,
Yeah.
but it lasted for generations.
Yes.
And when he returned to study them, he found that they were still this different kind of baboon
I think I
tribe.
did read about this a little bit.
Yeah. I'm doing a shitty job, I'm sure, of explaining it, but I love
No, I
that
think
guy.
you have the.
I'm
yes.
so fascinated by that guy's work.
Yes, he's very impressive, and I know I'm now that you're reminding me, I'm a little familiar with that particular study. I didn't know that it started with garbage, however, but it was a coincidental extermination of the more violent members of the troop.
Yes.
Yeah, so they were removed from the gene pool.
And it changed the entire culture to the point where generations later, they were still using this more
peaceful ways.
More kind.
Well, it didn't just change the culture. It may have changed the culture, but it appears we're arguing that to have changed the gene pool. Right.
Yes.
It's like an evolutionary pressure that's been applied. So you have, big dogs and small dogs. You don't allow the big ones to reproduce. You just reproduce the small ones.
Yes.
You get small dogs in the end.